parties to the Kyoto Protocol, and the 7th session of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties of the Paris Agreement. I now declare open the joint 4th meeting of COP30, 4th meeting of CMP20, and 4th meeting of CMA7. This morning, we are honored to have with us His Excellency Mr. Geraldo Alckmin, Vice President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, and Her Excellency Ms. Annalena Baerbock, President of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Dear delegates, I now invite you to watch a short film. Before we begin, allow me to briefly introduce the images and the music you are going to see and hear. The sequence of photographies was conceived by Lélia Vanik Salgado based on the photographs of her late husband, Sebastião Salgado. Their Amazonia series was created mainly between 2013 and 2019 as a testimony to the forest and to the peoples who inhabit it. Born in 1944 in Minas Gerais, Sebastião Salgado became a global reference in documentary photography. He responded with great generosity to the invitation of the COP30 presidency to allow his images to inspire the participants of this conference. In May 2025, Sebastião Salgado passed away. His legacy remains as a restless conscience of our time, a gaze that dignifies people, their work, their lands, while also calling us on protecting the forests, the waters, and all living beings in our planet. The music you will hear that was chosen by Lélia and him is an aria from the Baquianas Brasileiras No. 5 by Heitor Villa-Lobos, composed in 1938 for soprano and 8 cellos, a meeting between Brazilian traditional music and Baroque form. Villa-Lobos drew deeply from Brazilian popular songs, modinhas, cocos, cantigas, and he entered in a dialogue with the forest with a series of masterpieces. We will hear the version interpreted by Brazilian soprano Maria Lúcia Godoy, one of our most distinguished classical singers. I now invite you to watch this short presentation. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, thank you for your attention. I would like to invite to the podium His Excellency Mr. Geraldo Alckmin, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Brazil. Her Excellency Ms. Annalena Baerbock, President of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Mr. Simon Stew, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And Ms. Noura Hamladji, Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. I would like to acknowledge here the presence of Mr. Juliano Salgado, son of the late photographer Sebastião Salgado, who is here as a leader of the Instituto Terra, a remarkable reforestation and ecosystem restoration initiative in the state of Minas Gerais, and thank his family for having allowed us to have this beautiful opening. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Roberta Lima Ferreira, the lifetime partner of our late Daniel Machado da Fonseca, a dedicated climate negotiator with deep sense of social justice, an extraordinary human being who left us far too early during the build-up of this COP. Our hearts and thoughts are with Roberta and her family. Distinguished delegates, it is my pleasure to invite the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, Simon Stew, to address the plenary. Executive Secretary, you have the floor.
Excellencies, honourable ministers, your arrival meets COP mid-stride. We're no longer talking about what this COP must do. We are doing it, but we must strive for more. Negotiators are working around the clock. I commend the spirit of goodwill throughout week one. It reflects a widespread conviction that the Paris Agreement is humanity's only way to survive this global climate crisis and to spread the vast benefits of climate action to all nations. We are all aware of the headwinds, but I also sense a deep awareness of what's at stake and the need to show climate cooperation standing firm in a fractured world. I sense a real determination to build on the major progress of recent COPs and show once again that climate cooperation is working to deliver real progress, though needs to work faster and fairer. In week one, we've also seen some major steps forward in the action agenda, an increasingly key part of the Paris framework. In 7 days, nations have mustered a $1 trillion charge into clean energy and grids, rallied around a global plan to quadruple sustainable fuels, unlocked new waves of green industry, and started preparing a pipeline for new adaptation investment. They reflect an irrefutable fact driven by this process. A new economy is rising faster than forecasts. The good news, Last year alone, more than $2.2 trillion flowed into renewable energy. That's more than the GDP of over 180 countries. This real-world progress is not a nice-to-have. It is mission-critical. In this new era, much will depend on bringing our process closer to the real economy to speed up implementation and spread its vast benefits to billions of more people, as I have been saying. But friends, the pace of change in the real economy has not been matched by the pace of progress in these negotiating rooms. The spirit is there, but the speed is not. As climate disasters wreck millions of lives and hammer every economy, pushing up prices for food and other basic needs, we all know what's at stake. I said we needed an acceleration in the Amazon, and that applies equally to how we all go about our collective work here. Clearly, there is a huge amount of work ahead for ministers and negotiators. I urge you to get to the hardest issues fast. When these issues get pushed deep into extra time, everybody loses. We absolutely cannot afford to waste time on tactical delays or stonewalling. The time for performative diplomacy has now passed. Now's the time to roll up our sleeves, come together, and get the job done. The Secretariat will be with you every single step of the way. I thank you.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. It is my distinct pleasure to invite Her Excellency Ms. Annalena Baerbock, President of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, to address the plenary. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Vice President of Brazil, Geraldo Alckmin, COP President, dear Andre, Executive Secretary, dear Simon, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished delegates, citizens around the world. What better place to meet here in Brazil on the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, but also the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, than the birthplace of the UNFCCC. Congratulations to Brazil and to the people and the government for this COP for the forest, but also for the COP for the people. Speaking today as President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, I can assure you, in these heavy geopolitical times, we all feel the headwinds and the backlashes. But this is not a moment of resignation. It's a moment of action. Those of us who have spent years in climate process know that the COP journey has never been one of easy, linear progress. It always came and it always comes in ebbs and flows. Through late nights and endless negotiations, we learned to push through the despair of Copenhagen and carried forward the triumph of Paris. That is why, especially as we celebrate 10 years of Paris, which is a long time span if we look at the effects of climate crisis, but very short-term for international diplomacy, I want to focus on the flows, on the momentum of the last 10 years. Because hope and courage, when shared, can be contagious. And because, frankly, we do not have the luxury of wallowing when people are counting on us. The climate crisis is unrelenting. It pays no heed to our frustration or to the denial of skeptics. We saw this when Hurricane Melissa barreled into the Caribbean 2 weeks ago. We saw it again last week at the Philippines, endured to near back-to-back typhoons. As the Prime Minister of the Bahamas said during UN High-Level Week in September, I quote, "We do not have the luxury of restarting an esoteric conversation about the causes of climate change. Our living reality means that we simply do not have the time." End of quote. So let us look to the flows, to the positive shaping of our future. First, the unstoppable rise of clean energy. The Paris Agreement mentioned renewable energies only once. Those of you who have been there, you have to look for it in the papers. Many even doubting the potential of renewable energy. Talking about phasing out of coal was seen as almost sacrilegious. And now, today, 10 years later, short period in international diplomacy, we are transitioning away from fossil fuels altogether. We decided so 2 years ago. And renewable energies are cheap. They are now scalable. They are now the fastest growing source of power, accounting for 90% of new energy installation globally in 2024. We speak so often about tipping points in negative terms, but there are also the positive tipping points too. And this is one of them, maybe the most important one. You can demonize clean energy all you want, but 10 years after Paris, renewables are simply unstoppable. As they say, it's the economy, stupid. No investor wants stranded assets. In 2024, global investment in clean energy, as Simon Steele said, reached $2 trillion, 800 billion more than in fossil fuels. Our task now is to ensure that this innovation and the financing thereof reaches everyone, everywhere, especially those who have yet to benefit on it, especially on the African continent, because this was also the promise of Paris. The second flow is that innovation is no longer confined to a few countries or a few investors. We are innovating together interconnectedly. From last week's World Social Summit in Doha to the SDGs, from the Paris Agreement to Sevilla, from the Global Digital Compact to the new finance instruments emerging here in Belém, our job is to converge these agenda intersectoral. As early warning systems, resilient infrastructure, community preparedness are being transformed through digital tools that advance social justice and climate action at the same time. Social justice and climate actions are the same coin, the same two sides of the coin. It's already happening around the globe. It's happening on the ground. Just days ago, I met a young woman, a CEO, who developed a solar-powered, AI-enabled water purification device, crucial for flood-prone communities. That is the future. The third flow is this: the money exists. It simply needs to be redirected. In a world of abundance, the problem is not the availability of capital as such. It is where that capital goes. Last year alone, developing countries paid roughly $1.4 trillion in external debt servicing. Imagine what could be achieved if some of that burden were lifted and those resources reallocated to climate mitigation, clean energy, resilience and adaptation. We could forge stronger public-private partnerships. We could expand concessional finance. We could deliver on the Baku to Belem roadmap. As I said, this climate process comes in ebbs and flows. You may ask why I chose today, at the beginning of the high-level segment and the heavy negotiations about the flows. It's not naivety. It is because I too I have felt frustrated by global setbacks, but I've also been inspired time and again since Paris by the courage and determination of people who across regions and sectors pushed forward despite the headwinds. We have seen this movie before, and we know how it goes. Let us not wallow. The solutions are all out there, all over the world. We now have to connect them by focusing on our strongest and greatest strength, cross-regional cooperation. This is a new form of multilateralism. Or as you say here in Brazil, let us have a mutirão, meaning everybody joining forces. This collective power is stronger than ever. People, governments, businesses, finance actors. And the good news is, if flows are moving in the right direction, they are simply unstoppable. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. It is my pleasure now to invite His Excellency Mr. Geraldo Alckmin, Vice President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, to deliver a message to the plenary. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Embaixador André Correia do Lago, presidente da COP30, Ana Helena Baerbock, presidente da Assembleia Geral da ONU, Simon Steele, secretário executivo da Convenção Quadro das Nações Unidas, Noura Hanlad, secretária executiva adjunta, ministra Marina Silva, ministra do Meio Ambiente e Mudança do Clima do Brasil, em nome de quem cumprimento todas as ministras, ministros, chefes de delegação, lideranças aqui presentes, senhoras e senhores. É uma honra estar aqui em Belém, no coração da Amazônia, a maior floresta tropical do mundo, na abertura deste segmento de alto nível da COP30. Em meio a tantos discursos, negociações, uma diretriz deve permanecer. Esta deve ser a conferência da verdade, da implementação e, sobretudo, da responsabilidade. Responsabilidade com o planeta que habitamos, com as pessoas que aqui vivem e com as gerações que ainda virão. Devemos todos nós agir de tal forma que decisão tomada no presente, política, econômica ou ambiental, contribua para preservar as condições da vida na Terra, proteger a biodiversidade e assegurar a justiça entre as gerações. O Brasil e o governo do presidente Lula reconhecem a sua responsabilidade e os seus desafios no combate às mudanças climáticas. Somos guardiões de um dos maiores biomas do planeta e a Amazônia é peça vital para o equilíbrio climático global. Nosso compromisso de todos nós, elaborar os mapas do caminho para a transição energética e o fim do desmatamento ilegal. Senhoras e senhores, o tempo das promessas já passou. Cada fração de grau adicional no aquecimento global representa vidas em risco, mais desigualdade e mais perdas para aqueles que menos contribuíram com o problema. Por isso, esta COP deve marcar o início de uma década de aceleração e entrega. O momento em que o discurso se transforma em ação concreta, em que deixamos de debater metas e todos nós passamos a cumpri-las. O Brasil chega a esta conferência reafirmando seu compromisso com a energia limpa, a inovação e a inclusão. Temos a matriz energética mais renovável entre as grandes economias e somos pioneiros em bioenergia e biocombustíveis. Este ano, o governo do presidente Lula aumentou para 30% a participação do etanol na gasolina, em caráter obrigatório, e aumentou para 15% o bio no diesel, em caráter obrigatório. E a transição energética deve ser justa, não pode deixar ninguém para trás. Queremos que ela gere emprego, renda e desenvolvimento para todas as regiões e sirva de modelo de cooperação para outras nações. Também reafirmamos o compromisso de trabalhar para zerar o desmatamento ilegal até 2030, o lançamento do Fundo de Florestas Tropicais para sempre, que mobilizou bilhões de dólares em investimentos, representa uma nova forma de aliar preservação, economia verde e justiça social. Proteger a floresta é proteger as pessoas, porque a vida humana e a natureza são inseparáveis. Nesse sentido, precisamos buscar soluções criativas em áreas estratégicas, como na bioeconomia, que valoriza nossos recursos naturais de forma sustentável, na descarbonização, que é essencial para reduzir nossa pegada de carbono e que pode ser fortalecida com uma coalizão global de mercados regulados de carbono, a qual estabelecerá mecanismos de carbono transparentes e coletivamente acordados, e para a qual contamos com a adesão de mais e mais países. A proteção das florestas depende, sobretudo, de quem vive nelas. Mais de 28 milhões de brasileiros moram na região amazônica, e entre eles estão os povos indígenas e as comunidades tradicionais, que são os verdadeiros guardiões da floresta. O conhecimento ancestral desses povos é uma das mais poderosas formas de inteligência ecológica do planeta. A Amazônia, com toda a sua diversidade, deve ser o exemplo de que é possível crescer, produzir e conservar ao mesmo tempo. O Brasil propõe que a COP30 deixe como legado mapas de ação integrados na aceleração da transição energética para sair da dependência dos combustíveis fósseis. A meta é triplicar a energia renovável e dobrar a eficiência energética até 2030. Essa data está logo ali, mas os dados mostram que a capacidade renovável hoje ainda é a metade do que seria necessária para alcançar a meta. Na mesma linha, o compromisso de Belém ambiciona quadruplicar o uso de combustíveis sustentáveis até 2035, e 25 países já se juntaram ao esforço. Na erradicação do desmatamento ilegal, já reduzimos no Brasil o desmatamento em 50%, mas temos que fazer mais. Ideias inovadoras, como o TFFF, podem contribuir concretamente para chegar ao objetivo. Valorização das florestas, especialmente com foco na socio- e bioeconomia, assim como a recuperação de áreas degradadas. E promoção da cooperação entre governos, empresas e comunidades locais. Somente em um mutirão lograremos mudar mentes e realidades. O momento é para todos nós repactuar a nossa união em torno dos objetivos do Acordo de Paris. Apresentação pelos governos de NDCs alinhadas ao objetivo de 1,5 graus Celsius do Acordo de Paris é um dos sinais de compromisso com o combate à mudança do clima e o reforço do multilateralismo. A NDC do Brasil, ousada, mas realista, que tive a honra de anunciar no ano passado com a ministra Marina na COP29 em Baku, determina compromisso de reduzir as emissões líquidas de gases de efeito estufa no país de 59% a 67% até 2035, em comparação aos níveis de 2005. Em programas e políticas nacionais, o Brasil procura fazer a sua parte. A incorporação do setor industrial e tecnológico ao esforço é imprescindível e demanda coordenação eficaz e focada entre governo e o setor privado, em áreas como descarbonização industrial, economia circular, matriz energética renovável, fomento aos biocombustíveis, pesquisa de novos materiais e processos de produção mais eficientes. E a COP30 marca agora a transição do regime da negociação para a implementação. As várias decisões que sairão de Belém reforçarão mecanismos e estimularão novos arranjos para acelerar a ação de combate à mudança climática em escala global. E isso faremos por escolha própria, porque é a escolha certa a ser feita. Estamos aqui, todos nós, para transformar a ambição em resultados e em boas políticas públicas. Nosso dever é garantir que a ação climática global seja guiada pela ética da responsabilidade, uma ética que une ciência, solidariedade, progresso e dignidade. O Brasil acredita que ética, inovação e sustentabilidade não são caminhos paralelos, mas o mesmo caminho, o da responsabilidade compartilhada pelo futuro comum da humanidade. Convido os líderes aqui presentes a agirem com esse mesmo senso de urgência, de pragmatismo e de esperança. O tempo de agir é agora. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Vice President Alckmin. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this brings us to the end of the ceremonial opening of the high-level segment. I'd ask you to remain in your seats to allow our guests to leave the podium before we begin the delivery of statements. So just a 2-minute pause, I will accompany the authorities. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honorable guests, today representatives of parties and groups will deliver their national and group statements. I would like to inform Your Excellencies of measures in place to ensure effective time management. There is a 3-minute time limit for national statements and 5 minutes for group statements during the high-level segment. Speakers are strongly encouraged to ensure the statements do not exceed allotted times. Additionally, in line with the practice of other UN bodies and to ensure the smooth conduct of the meeting, a bell will be used to signal when the allotted time is exceeded. Statements should be as concise as possible, noting that full texts of the official statements will be made available on the UNFCCC website. And finally, please note that speakers who are not in the plenary at the time for delivery of their statement will be scheduled to speak at the end of the statements of the same category. This session will conclude at 1. Statements that have not been delivered by 1 will be moved to the afternoon session, scheduled to begin at 3. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honorable guests, let us begin. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Sara Agassen Munoz, Deputy Prime Minister of Spain. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Gracias. Hace 10 años adoptamos juntos el Acuerdo de París, convencidos de que el multilateralismo ambicioso es la única respuesta posible contra la emergencia climática. Desde entonces hemos dado grandes pasos de un mundo en el que la neutralidad climática era impensable, dominado por la inversión en combustibles fósiles, a otro donde más de 100 países que representan el 80% del PIB mundial tienen objetivos de emisiones netas cero, en el que las renovables avanzan imparables y donde la adaptación progresa con más de 170 planes específicos. Cada décima de grado cuenta. Hay motivos para la esperanza, pero aún queda mucho camino por recorrer. El cambio climático se acelera, sus impactos se intensifican, son más frecuentes, duraderos y con mayor alcance territorial. Hablamos de olas de calor, de incendios, de sequías, de inundaciones, huracanes, impactos que muchos de los que estamos aquí, nuestros países, hemos sufrido. Aquí, precisamente, en este espacio, en el pulmón de nuestro planeta, la Amazonia, sufren los fenómenos más extremos del cambio climático. En España también hemos vivido este último año la cara más amarga del cambio climático, una dana que azotó Valencia o los incendios que asolaron la península ibérica este verano. Son efectos distintos en los territorios, pero con una amenaza común. Estamos ante una emergencia climática que es una crisis sanitaria, social y de seguridad, agravada en los últimos años por el avance exponencial del negacionismo, la desinformación y los ataques a la ciencia, que nos hacen más vulnerables y solo aumentan las pérdidas y daños. Solo con un esfuerzo colectivo y constante a favor de la ciencia podremos garantizar que la acción climática sea efectiva y sostenida en el tiempo. Necesitamos intensificar nuestros esfuerzos. Una acción climática con sinergias muy poderosas. Una agenda climática que es una agenda de salud pública, de justicia social, de prosperidad, de derechos humanos y paz. Una apuesta ganadora para todos, especialmente para los más vulnerables. Así lo hacemos en España, apostando por las renovables, por la eficiencia energética, por los planes de adaptación, por la transición justa, sin dejar a nadie atrás, haciendo que esta transformación también nos acerque a la igualdad de género real. Animo a que juntos trabajemos en la implementación de esta agenda, que es una agenda de oportunidades, y que la COP de Belén nos permita responder a las brechas de ambición implementando políticas de adaptación y de mitigación, movilizar recursos financieros a la escala necesaria y mantener vivo el objetivo de 1,5 grados. Avancemos en esta agenda de prosperidad. Tenemos que hacerlo por responsabilidad, por convicción y por oportunidad. Pueden contar con España. Gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Dhananjay Ramphul, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mauritius. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, allow me first to thank Brazil for hosting us in Belém, gateway to the heart of the Amazon and the confluence of nature and humanity, a reminder of our collective responsibilities towards nature. Mr. President, our land, our ocean and our air are facing unprecedented challenges. Climate crisis is today's reality. It is burning our forests, bleaching our corals, flooding our coasts, and damaging our ecosystem services beyond repair. Our very existence is at stake. Excellencies, a decade after the promises of the Paris Agreement, despite our good intentions, we realize that we have not done enough. Our planet demands action now. COP30 must be the moment of truth, the moment we genuinely turn promises into progress ambition into action. The ICJ has spoken. It is the duty of states to protect the climate system. Commitments are binding, both for cutting down emissions and for providing support for mitigation and adaptation. For Mauritius, as a small island developing state, the stakes could not be higher. We contribute next to nothing to global emissions, less than 0.01%. Yet, we participate in the global commitment to reduce emissions. Our NDC 3.0 commits to cutting emissions by 40% and achieving 60% of renewable power. We are investing in clean energy, decarbonizing key sectors, restoring our mangroves and forests, and protecting our reefs. Is everybody contributing their fair share? That's the question. The latest NDC synthesis report confirms the huge gap in responding to the urgency of reducing emissions. Excellencies, our ocean is our lifeblood, our heritage, and a primary economic engine. Our very existence depends on healthy oceans. Mauritius is diverting critical national resources from development to address coastal erosion and reef restoration. The 2025 UNEP Adaptation Gap Report reveals a funding chasm. Let us be clear, national ambition, especially for SIDS, cannot succeed without global solidarity. Climate action makes economic sense. Every dollar invested in adaptation saves significantly more. We either invest now or wait until no amount of finance can cure the climate. Action is not thrift. Inaction is folly. We must leave Belem not with declarations, but with the determination to act and deliver for a future we and our children deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Yalchim Rafiev, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Dear Mr. Co-President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to speak here today, 1 year after COP29 in Baku. Last year, Azerbaijan, under the leadership of the President Ilham Aliyev, hosted one of the most productive COPs ever and guided the process to success. We worked with determination, bridged divides among parties, reinforced multilateralism, and achieved consensus on issues that had eluded resolution in previous negotiations. We successfully concluded mandates addressing all pillars of the Paris Agreement. This included the adoption of the new collective quantified goal, a landmark commitment to mobilize at least $300 billion annually for developing countries by 2035, and the largest ever UN negotiated financial package. We also agreed to set a goal of scaling up climate finance to $1.3 trillion per year by 2035, and the COP29 and COP30 presidencies recently released Baku to Belem roadmap to guide us on how to achieve this target. Excellencies, Azerbaijan has already submitted its NDC 3.0, reflecting our commitment to Paris Agreement. Even though we submitted our updated NDC 2.0 only 2 years ago, and despite major challenges linked to a large-scale reconstruction and demining activities across the 20% of our territory liberated after 3 decades of occupation, Azerbaijan is determined to advance more ambitious climate action. Our new target is to cut emissions by 40% by 2035. This advances our previous 2050 goal by 15 years, marking a significant increase in ambition. Our new NDC is also economy-wide and covers all sectors, including power, buildings, oil and gas, transport, industry, waste, agriculture, and land use. Ladies and gentlemen, Azerbaijan, like many other countries, is facing serious pressures from climate change. Floods, droughts, forest fires, and many other issues are increasingly affecting our region. Alongside these challenges, we are also confronted with an unprecedented threat of the rapid decline in the water level of the Caspian Sea, the world's largest inland body of water. The pace at which the Caspian is shrinking is alarming. with water levels falling by roughly 20 to 30 centimeters each year. This decline severely affects coastal communities, leads to receding shorelines, reduces fisheries, and poses growing risks to port operations. Strong and meaningful international cooperation is therefore imperative to advancing shared science-based solutions. We must address this mounting problem with a clear focus on preventing yet another environmental catastrophe in our region. Colleagues, Azerbaijan is committed to multilateralism and we want to preserve the process. So we are here at COP30 to continue working with all partners and build solutions that help us move forward in solidarity for a green world. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Lars Agard, Minister of Climate, Energy and Utilities of Denmark, and His Excellency Mr. Wopke Hoekstra, Commissioner for Climate, Net Zero and Clean Growth of the European Commission, speaking on behalf of the European Union Group. Your Excellencies, you have the floor.
COP President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, climate change is real. It's already affecting our lives across the globe. Higher frequency and impact of wildfires, floods, storms and droughts. Previous extremes are now new normal, but there's nothing normal about this. And it only gets worse if we don't act. The EU's climate action is guided by science and evidence. Here at COP30, we need to bend the curve. We must act now, and we must act together to cut emissions and adapt to climate realities of today and tomorrow. In an unpredictable world, our partners in all corners of the world can count on the European Union. We stand firm on our commitment to the Paris Agreement. On November 5th, earlier this month, environmental and climate ministers of the EU formally adopted European Union's new NDC under the Paris Agreement. The NDC aims to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions by a range of 66.25 and 72.5% below 99 level by 2035. And it's covering all sectors of the economy and all greenhouse gas emissions. This is an ambitious milestone on the path to a 90% net reduction target by 2040 compared to 1990 levels, which will be written into EU's climate law as our legally binding target for 2040. And with that, we set a pathway that is more ambitious than a linear trajectory to climate neutrality by 2050. With these targets, EU stands firm for climate action based on science. We encourage all parties to respond with the same commitment and urgency. Accelerating the green transition is also a powerful driver of economic growth, competitiveness and social development. Over time, it will lower energy prices, reduce dependency on imported fossil fuels, and provide energy security in a changing geographic political world. And it will create high-quality jobs in and outside of Europe. We need to act. We need to act without delay. Together, let's bend the curve.
Dear Co-President, dear Andre, ladies and gentlemen, we meet in Belém when science demands greater action, and we have no other tool than multilateralism to make sure that we deliver on it. The European Union has renewed its ambition and submitted its 2035 NDC with a contribution of 66.3 to 72.5% emission reductions compared to 1990 levels. And this reflects a truly credible path towards our net zero goals by mid-century. At home in the European Union, we do have a years-long track record of delivering real emission cuts across all sectors while preparing our economies for the transition ahead. Now, here in Belém, we do need to make sure we deliver several elements. First, we do need a collective response plan that helps us close the gap between where we are today and where we need to be. We're going in the right direction, absolutely. But we need to go there faster, and we need to go there together. We must speed up the global energy transition by implementing the global stocktake, basically by producing more renewables, by boosting energy efficiency, and using all tools, including carbon pricing, while ensuring a just transition for everyone. Secondly, there's global resilience. Adaptation and preparedness must be top priorities to protect communities, to protect ecosystems and livelihoods. And I'm truly proud of the work we have done, that has been done by the negotiators on adaptation indicators. Third, all actors must work together to scale up financing for climate action in developing countries, as was agreed last year in Baku. And it is in this context that we urgently need to improve access, in particular for the LDCs and the SIDS, and for adaptation. And to give you our numbers, the European Union and its member states are already major contributors. We have been doing 32 billion in public finance and 11 billion in mobilized private finance in 2024, and that was again a step up compared to the year before. And by the way, we continue to invite others who have the means to do so to join us in making sure we deliver on this endeavour. Together with the European Investment Bank, we remain the largest provider of international public climate finance. Fourth and finally, and the Vice President of Brazil was already mentioning that, carbon pricing. You all know the saying by Victor Hugo that there's nothing so powerful as an idea for which the time has come. And this is something we do need to pursue. Pricing carbon is something we need to pursue with as many as possible, as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.
I would like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Steven Victor, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Environment of Palau, speaking on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States.
COP President, Excellencies, distinguished ministers, colleagues, Palau has the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the 39 members of the Alliance of Small Island States. Allow me to align with the remarks to be delivered by Iraq on behalf of the G77 and China. AOC extends its sincere appreciation to the government and the people of Brazil for the warm welcome here at COP30 in Belem. Here at COP30, which President Lula has dubbed the Cup of Truth, we must be honest with ourselves and with each other. The latest science is clear. We are dangerously off track. to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. Our collective response has not yet been matched the scale and urgency of this crisis, worsening the impacts across the planet. This is why for small island developing states, 1.5 degrees is not a political slogan. It is a non-negotiable survival threshold for our people, our culture, and our livelihoods. Mr. President, AOCs has come here with solutions. We have made a proposal for a robust response plan to NDC synthesis report to get us back on track to 1.5 degrees. Our goal is not to finger point or undermine the Paris Agreement policy cycle. Instead, it is to have us work together with trust to close the ambition gap to 1.5 degrees, which the International Court of Justice advisory opinion affirmed as the legal benchmark and scientifically based consensus target under the Paris Agreement. At the same time, we must use our existing spaces, such as the mitigation work program, effectively, and to agree to refine our global stocktake process and to ensure it considers the best available science from the IPCC to safeguard its scientific integrity. On the UAE dialogue, we are disappointed that 2 years after the adoption of the GST, we are still unable to advance follow-up on outcomes of GST1, particularly the just, orderly, and equitable transition away from fossil fuels. Adaptation is an ever-increasing priority for AOCs. At COP30, we are mandated to conclude the UAE Belem work program on indicators. We recognize the complexity of this task, given that further work is needed to refine those indicators that are still not complete. Our view is that subsidiary bodies can continue this work toward a set of credible, balanced, and workable set of indicators. Mr. President, Excellencies, for small island, climate action is possible if it's underpinned by credible and accessible finance, the development and transfer of appropriate technologies and capacity building for developing countries. Public finance remains vital, and this is why we join other developing countries in a call to operationalize Article 9.1. We must also see at least tripling annual outflows from our climate finance, including CCF, Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, the Adaptation Fund, and the Global Environmental Facility. We also note with concern recent challenges in CCF approvals with the introduction of arbitrary conditions based on per capita incomes and population size by some board members. This is not in line with our convention, the Paris Agreement, of our agreed rules under CCF. This situation must stop. We must adhere to past agreements, including operationalizing the special circumstance of seats to maintain and rebuild the fragile trust and finance. The adaptation finance gap continues to grow. The recent UNEP gap report found that developing countries will spend $350 billion a year to adapt to climate change by 2035. To address this gap, we join other developing countries in calling for at least tripling of adaptation finance to $120 billion by 2030. Trust requires transparency, and action requires predictability. Last year in Baku, we all agreed to the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. Many parties have said they want to talk about the NCQG and its implementation. Yet, in relevant agenda items on Article 9.5, where developed countries have agreed to elaborate their actual roadmaps on climate finance, we have seen deliberate attempts to stop any and all progress. It is crucial that we update the terms of reference of biennial communications developed countries to reflect elements of NCQG. AOCs comes to Belem with a genuine desire to work together and to build trust to deliver our climate commitments. We urge all parties, under capable guidance of Presidency, to act with urgency and solidarity this moment demands. For us, this is not just about ambition. It is about taking actions required to ensure a safe and prosperous future for all of us. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Lukman Al-Faili, Chair of G77 in China and Permanent Representative of Iraq to the United Nations, speaking on behalf of the Group of 77 in China. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
His Excellency Ambassador André de Logo, President of COP30, CMP20, CMA7. Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Mr. Simon Sillen. Excellencies, thank you for giving me the floor. I'm honored to speak on behalf of a group of 77 and China. A longer version of the statement will be provided later. Group of 77 and China appreciates the positive environment outcome of this week one. We look forward to having the positiveness continued and allowing us to move toward a successful outcome for this COP. Scaling up climate finance in accordance with the principles and provisions of UNFCCC and Paris Agreement formed the core of the priorities for G77 and China. At COP30, we must secure outcomes that enable the provision and mobilization of finance for developed countries at the necessary scale and quality, while addressing the systematic disenabler of climate finance. This includes ensuring a successful outcome on the agenda item related to climate finance. Further, it's important to highlight the importance of Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement, which forms a cornerstone of climate finance, as well as Article 9.5, which is a key to ensuring the predictability of climate finance from the developed countries, in a manner that enables developing countries to effectively plan their climate action. We underscore the need to improve bilateral communication submitted by developed countries to demonstrate additionality and delivery of predictability needed. We emphasize the importance of operationalizing the CMA's decision to encourage the operating entities of the financial mechanism and other multilateral climate funds to at least triple their annual outflow of the operating entities by 2030. With a significant increase of public resources provided through the fund, G77 and China underscores that this agreed goal can only be met through fully executed contributions, input from developed countries to the trust fund of the operating entity in a predictable, timely, ambitious manner. For the 9th replenishment of the GEF and further capitalization of its to LDCF and SECE, the third replenishment of the GCF, the first replenishment of the fund of responding to loss and damage, and further capitalization of the adoption fund. G77 and China further emphasizes the need to request from all climate funds to have a transparent financing procedure that applies equally to all non-Annex 1 Convention parties. G77 and China further expresses grave concern regarding the application of unilateral and contradictory policies on the project proposed by UNIDO on behalf of Sultan of Oman in the Green Climate Fund by a minority of board members representing a few developed countries. On the adaptation, G77 and China highlight the importance of agenda items related to GGA and national adaptation plans. It is vital that we search successful outcome for the COP30. We stress the importance of means of implementation in implementing adaptation effort under GGA, and that GGA outcomes need to contain a strong reference to finance flow from developed to developing countries. With regard to NAP agenda items, the group appreciates the clear progress we made at this COP and is looking forward to delivering an outcome that is that is in favor of advancing NAP implementation. In closing, G77 and China urges the international community to act in a unity in addressing climate change, consistent with the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. We look forward to a successful COP30 here in Belem. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Andreas Bjelland Eriksen, Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
President, 10 years after Paris, we can conclude that the Paris Agreement is working. Countries are setting climate targets and implementing them. The global energy transition is picking up scale and pace. COP30 must celebrate that multilateralism is delivering while facing what science tells us. Limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees will require us to enhance ambition and accelerate implementation. Therefore, Norway is stepping up. Our 1.5 nationally determined contribution, our NDC for 2035, is set to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 70 to 75% by 2035 compared to 1990. We will do this in cooperation with the European Union as well as through ambitious national policies. Carbon pricing is a cornerstone. We have presented a plan to gradually increase the carbon tax towards 2035. And this and other measures will enable us to progress along timelines for phasing out the use of fossil fuels in key sectors by 2050. President, Norway has also delivered on past commitments. We have overachieved our Kyoto Protocol commitments, and we will deliver on our 2030 NDC. Norway has increased its support to developing countries from already high levels. On provision of climate finance, we have for the third time exceeded our target to double climate finance by 2026. Since 2008, Norway has partnered with tropical forest countries to reduce deforestation with substantial effects. However, our collective ambition to halt deforestation by 2030 means we need to do more. Norway therefore announced a conditional investment to the TFFF of up to $3 billion over 10 years, and I salute Brazil for this important initiative. We also plan to support emission reductions in developing countries worth up to $1.5 billion through Article 6 arrangements. We must collectively meet the finance commitments from last year. In doing so, increasing support to adaptation, especially to the least developed countries and small island states, is of utmost importance. Before we leave Belém, we must unite with a clear message. We are steadfast in our resolve to strengthen ambition, accelerate implementation, and ramp up international cooperation. No one can do this job alone, and we call upon all partners, state and non-state actors, to catalyze actions and investment for climate action. The only way forward is together. I thank you, President.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Matthew Samuda, Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation of Jamaica. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the people of Jamaica here at COP30 in Belém, Brazil. We extend our deep appreciation to the government of Brazil and to the COP President, Ambassador André Correa do Logo, whose leadership we trust will reignite global determination to keep 1.5 degrees alive. Excellencies, on October 28, 2025, Hurricane Melissa changed the life of every Jamaican. In less than 24 hours, a tropical storm exploded into a historic and one of the most powerful Category 5 hurricanes ever. The result? Hundreds of thousands displaced and critical infrastructure destroyed. Storm surge reached 13 feet and rainfall in the central highlands surpassed 30 inches within hours. This is the new face of climate change. Mr. President, scientists have confirmed that the conditions driving Melissa's rapid intensification were made 6 times more likely because of human-induced warning. Sadly, extreme events are becoming our new norm. Preliminary estimates place damages around $10 billion or approximately a third or just under a third of our GDP. No small island state can absorb losses of this magnitude. Excellencies, Jamaicans are resilient, but resilience must not be defined as surviving the unbearable. We did not create this crisis, but we refuse to stand as victims. We choose action. Long before Melissa, Jamaica invested in preparedness. As examples, we developed one of the world's most advanced disaster risk financing strategies, including a sovereign catastrophe bond renewed with the World Bank in 2024. We have submitted our enhanced NDCs. We have advanced our LTS for a low-carbon, climate-resilient future. And finally, we are now finalizing our national adaptation plan. These are not small steps for a small island, but instead acts of courage and foresight. We thank the international community, CARICOM, and the United Nations Secretary General for their solidarity during this time. But solidarity must extend beyond sympathy. Mr. President, we welcome the fund for responding to loss and damage, and for us, access is not charity, but indeed climate justice. We urge all developed countries to contribute to the fund meaningfully so that frontline countries can recover and rebuild stronger. The establishment of this fund has justified our call for it to be managed through a World Bank facility, and therefore urge that this could serve as a guiding example as we contemplate the structured approach for other funds in the financial mechanism. Excellencies, the other storm is already forming. Our only defense is ambition, financing, and collective will. We call on the global community, especially major emitters, to honor their commitments and safeguard the 1.5-degree threshold. For Jamaica, this is survival. It's about our people and their right to a safe and prosperous future. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Armando Paino Enriquez Daher, Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of the Dominican Republic. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguida Presidencia, excelentísimos jefes y jefas de Estado, estimados delegados, permítanme comenzar expresando nuestro agradecimiento a la Presidencia y al pueblo del Brasil por su liderazgo y hospitalidad al presidir la COP30 aquí en Belém, corazón de la Amazonía. Hoy me dirijo a ustedes con un mensaje claro. La adaptación es la prioridad que define nuestra supervivencia colectiva como pequeños estados insulares. Para los SIDS, cada año que pasa sin apoyo y respuestas contundentes nos deja más expuestos, más vulnerables y con menos margen para proteger lo que somos y lo que tenemos. El reciente huracán Melissa evidenció que el Caribe vive la crisis climática en primera línea. Un solo evento puede poner en riesgo la seguridad hídrica y alimentaria, destruir infraestructura crítica y revertir años de desarrollo en cuestión de horas. Y mientras lidiamos con sequías más prolongadas, temperaturas crecientes y pérdida de biodiversidad, enfrentamos además una amenaza que ya no es invisible, el sargazo, que asfixia ecosistemas, afecta la pesca y paraliza sectores como el turismo esenciales. Lo que antes era esporádico, hoy exige soluciones regionales ciencia, cooperación y financiamiento. Frente a esta realidad, la República Dominicana no llega a Belén con las manos vacías. Hace 2 días lanzamos nuestra plataforma País de Financiamiento Climático para mejorar el acceso al financiamiento climático y convertir nuestras políticas en inversiones reales para la resiliencia y el desarrollo sostenible por y para la gente. La República Dominicana impulsa una transición energética justa, fortalece la agricultura resiliente y conserva activamente sus ecosistemas. Como evidencia de esto, nos enorgullece informar que hemos logrado proteger más del 30% de nuestros ecosistemas costeros y marinos, reafirmando nuestro compromiso con un desarrollo sostenible. Sin embargo, ningún avance nacional puede compensar la magnitud de nuestra vulnerabilidad y la exposición al riesgo. Por ello, en esta COP hacemos un llamado contundente. Los países desarrollados deben como mínimo triplicar el financiamiento destinado a la adaptación climática para 2030, alcanzando al menos 120.000 millones de dólares anuales. Este financiamiento debe ser nuevo, adicional y predominantemente en forma de donaciones. Excelencias, no pedimos lo imposible, exigimos lo indispensable. Esta COP debe ser un punto de inflexión y necesitamos acelerar la implementación de los fondos climáticos y consolidar una arquitectura financiera más justa. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Grace Fu, Minister of Sustainability and the Environment of Singapore. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, climate change is outpacing our collective response. Geopolitical tensions and economic volatility are intensifying. Multilateral cooperation is under strain. Singapore reaffirms our commitment to work with the global community to progress towards our climate goals. We are one of 13 countries who submitted the 2035 NDC before the 10th February deadline. We pledged to reduce our emissions to between 45 to 50 million tons of CO2 by 2035, with a pathway to net zero in 2050. We have quadrupled our solar deployment from 2020 and are diversifying our energy mix through sources such as biomethane and electricity imports. We are also studying the potential deployment of nuclear energy. We are equally focused on adaptation and resilience. We are developing our inaugural National Adaptation Plan to address climate impacts, including sea level rise, urban heat, and food and water supply resilience. We are working with our ASEAN partners to advance the ASEAN Power Grid, a key enabler of the region's energy transition, and develop carbon capture and storage technologies. We are also collaborating on research and capacity building initiatives to strengthen regional adaptation and resilience. Implementation requires adequate financing based on the Paris Agreement principles. The COP30 Belem roadmap recognizes the global climate finance gap. As a global financial hub, Singapore is voluntarily addressing this gap through capacity building, blended finance, and carbon markets. Through the FAST-P, we have mobilized $510 million to deploy in green and sustainable infrastructure in Southeast and South Asia. Carbon markets are another key enabler of finance. Singapore has signed 10 implementation agreements under Article 6, and we have committed to procure 2 million tons of nature-based carbon credits from projects in Ghana, Paraguay, and Peru. We also launched the Coalition to Grow Carbon Markets with Kenya and the UK to develop high-integrity voluntary markets, which now has 10 member countries. To help Asia phase out coal, we are developing energy transition credits with partners. Singapore reaffirms our full support for the COP30 presidency and the UNFCCC multilateral process. This is a critical time, requiring all parties to stand firm for climate action, I urge parties to assume collective leadership towards our climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I would like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Flavien Philomèle-Joubert, Minister of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment of Seychelles.
Co-President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is an honor to address this high-level segment on behalf of the government and the people of the Republic of Seychelles. At the outset, allow me to extend our appreciation to the government and people of Brazil for the warm welcome here at COP30 in Belem. We gather here in Belem, a city at the heart and the world's greatest forest, guided by the spirit of the Amazon and by the call issued during the Leaders' Summit a week ago. That call reminded us that courage, solidarity, and collective action are our only path forward. Mr. President, Seychelles Islands before you as a proud small island developing states from the Indian Ocean, a nation of immense natural beauty, but also of profound vulnerability. For us, climate change is not a distant threat. It is a daily reality. Sea levels are rising, coastlines are eroding, coral reefs are bleaching, and livelihoods are increasingly at risk. Each storm, each drought threatens to undo years of progress. At the national level, Seychelles continues to invest in ecosystem-based adaptation, restoring mangroves, rehabilitating coral reefs, and reinforcing coral infrastructures. Yet, adaptation finance remains grossly insufficient. We join the global call for a tripling of the adaptation funds and for simplified direct access for seeds, whose capacity constraints demand flexible and targeted support mechanisms. For us, climate action is not a choice. It is not an abstract debate. It is a matter of national survival. That is why we call for the following. Firstly, Seychelles urges the COP to deliver a bold, ambiguous reaffirmation of the 1.5 degrees limit. This target is not negotiable for small islands. Exceeding 1.5 is a death sentence for a nation like mine. Secondly, we call for a major breakthrough on adaptation finance. Promises alone will not hold back the rising seas. We need predictable, accessible, multi-year financing, fit for purpose for seeds. We welcome Brazil's leadership in mobilizing innovative financial instruments and ask that seeds be placed at the center of this mechanism. Thirdly, we urge parties to integrate blue carbon ecosystem, our mangroves, seagrass, and coral reefs into global nature-based finance frameworks, including those aligned with Tropical Forest Forever facility. For islands like Seychelles, these ecosystems are our forests. They protected our coastline and stored carbon and sustain our economy. Fourthly, on loss and damage, Seychelles welcome the operationalization of the fund responding to loss and damage, a landmark achievement under the process. However, it must now be fully capitalized and readily accessible to those who need it most. We are doing our best, but we cannot survive or succeed alone. Let this COP be implemented as the moment when the world chooses courage over delay, action and implementation over rhetoric. Seychelles stands ready to work with all parties to deliver an outcome worthy of this moment, because for us, this is not just about ambition. It is about taking action and implementation required to ensure a safe and prosperous future for us all. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Sung-Won Kim, Minister of Climate, Energy and Environment of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
의장님, 기후위기 대응에 함께하는 동료 여러분, 먼저 올 한 해 COP30의 성공적인 개최를 위해 리더십을 보여주신 의장국 브라질과 UN 기후변화협약 사무국에 진심으로 감사를 표합니다. 우리는 10년 전 파리에서 기후변화의 위협에 대한 전 지구적 대응을 강화하기로 약속한 바 있습니다. 하와이 마우나루와 천문대의 대기 중 이산화탄소 관측값이 처음으로 400ppm을 넘긴 해였습니다. 그러나 지난해 이미 사실상 1.5도를 돌파하였습니다. 파리협정 1.5도 목표는 위기에 처해 있고 지구는 더 이상 기다려줄 수 없습니다. 기후위기에 대응할 기회의 창은 점점 좁아지고 있습니다. 이러한 위기의식 속에 대한민국은 지난해 10월 기후에너지환경부를 출범했습니다. 국내 온실가스 배출량의 70%에 해당하는 에너지 정책과 총괄적 기후 정책을 한 부처에서 이행하여 온실가스 감축을 가속화하고 전 지구적 탈탄소 녹색 전환을 선도하기 위함입니다. 또한 환경의 큰 가치 아래 사람과 사람, 사람과 환경이 공존하는 미래를 만들고자 함입니다. 나아가 이 자리를 빌려 기후에너지환경부의 첫 번째 과제인 대한민국 2035년 국가 온실가스 감축 목표를 국제사회에 공표하고자 합니다. 우리는 2035년까지 국가 온실가스 배출량을 2018년 대비 53%에서 61%를 목표로 하여 감축하겠습니다. 파리협정이 채택하고 10년간 국제사회의 노력으로 세기말 온도의 상승 전망을 약 1.5도 낮췄습니다. 그러나 파리협정의 목표와는 여전히 괴리가 큽니다. 대한민국의 2035 NDC는 국제사회에 약속한 2050년 탄소 중립을 이행하고 더 나아가 1.5도 목표와 부합하는 감축 경로 달성을 위해 선도적으로 노력하겠다는 의지를 담고 있습니다. 한국은 전쟁의 폐허에서 글로벌 제조업 공급망의 핵심 플레이어로 성장했습니다. 또한 대중음악, 드라마, 패션과 뷰티 등 전 세계적 사랑을 받는 K컬처와 수차례 위기에 맞서 시민의 힘으로 지켜낸 K민주주의로 많은 국가들의 영감을 주고 있습니다. 한국의 새로운 도전은 K녹색 전환입니다. 에너지 집약적인 산업 구조와 좁은 국토라는 어려운 여건을 혁신적 제조업과 AI 기술 경쟁력, 시민 참여 거버넌스로 극복하여 전 세계 녹색 전환을 선도하겠습니다. 예를 들어 AI와 데이터 센터로 인한 폭발적인 전력 수요 증가를 햇빛과 바람 에너지 기반 시스템으로 대응하며 이 과정에서 발생한 이익을 지역사회와 공유하겠습니다. 탄소 중립 AI 기술로 국민의 안전과 번영을 더욱 꼼꼼하게 챙기는 사람 중심 지속 가능 녹색 성장 전략을 범정부적으로 만들어갈 예정입니다. 한국이 유치 추진 중인 2026년 5월 UNFCCC 기후 주간을 통해 더 많은 미래를 공유할 수 있기를 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Mariam Tangara, Minister of Environment, Sanitation and Sustainable Development of Mali. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président de la COP, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi, à l'entame de mes propos, d'adresser mes vives félicitations à la présidence de la COP ainsi qu'au peuple et au gouvernement de la République fédérative du Brésil pour l'accueil chaleureux et l'organisation exemplaire de cette conférence des parties. C'est pour moi un honneur et un grand privilège de prendre la parole devant cette auguste assemblée réunie ici à Belém, au cœur de l'Amazonie, symbole vivant de la richesse et de la fragilité de notre planète. Je voudrais également transmettre les salutations fraternelles du peuple du Mali et de son gouvernement sous le leadership éclairée du président de la transition, chef de l'État, son Excellence le général d'armée Assimi Goïta, président de la Confédération des États du Sahel, est résolument engagé dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Mesdames et messieurs, le Mali subit de plein fouet les effets néfastes et croissants des changements climatiques. Les études réalisées montrent que le pays est confronté aux sécheresses récurrentes, aux inondations, aux vents forts, aux fortes variations de température, provoquant d'énormes pertes en vies humaines et réduisant considérablement la résilience de nos communautés. En 2025, les pluies diluviennes ont causé d'importants dégâts matériels, des pertes en vies humaines affectant des milliers de personnes. Ces drames rappellent que la crise climatique n'est plus une menace lointaine. Elle est désormais une réalité quotidienne impactant nos écosystèmes, nos villes et notre quotidien. Mesdames et messieurs, le Mali, vaste pays sahélien dont les 2/3 sont désertiques, dépend principalement de l'agriculture, de l'élevage, de la pêche et de la foresterie. Ces activités vitales qui emploient plus de 80% de la population active sont aujourd'hui gravement perturbées par les effets du dérèglement climatique, exacerbant les tensions autour des ressources naturelles et contribuant à fragiliser la région du Sahel. Conscient de ces enjeux, le Nexus Climat, Paix et Sécurité, reconnu comme l'un des principaux défis du Sahel, constitue désormais un cadre essentiel de convergence des initiatives novatrices. Le Mali, qui est un faible émetteur de gaz à effet de serre, demeure résolument engagé à jouer pleinement sa partition dans la lutte contre ce fléau planétaire. C'est pourquoi il a adopté sa vision 2063, accompagnée d'une stratégie nationale pour l'émergence et le développement durable et un plan d'action pour renforcer l'amélioration du cadre de vie des populations. Plusieurs actions sont prévues ou en cours de réalisation, dont la construction de 4 centrales solaires photovoltaïques, la réalisation des centaines de kilomètres de lignes et de transport et de distribution d'électricité. En outre, dans le cadre de la poursuite des œuvres sociales initiées par son Excellence le général d'armée, président de la transition, le chef d'État, 512 forages ont été réalisés au bénéfice des populations vulnérables. Enfin, la 3e génération de notre CDN, en cours d'élaboration, ambitionne de rehausser le niveau de notre ambition climatique. C'est le lieu également de rappeler que depuis le 6 juin 2024, les États du Mali, du Niger et du Burkina Faso ont décidé de créer la Confédération des États du Sahel avec comme principaux axes de diplomatie, la défense et le développement, lesquels intègrent une part importante des questions transversales climatiques et environnementales. Il convient de signaler toutefois que le Mali, à l'instar de bien d'autres États africains, regrette que les promesses répétées de la COP 2015 et la COP 2024 de Bakou peinent encore à se concrétiser. Les engagements sur le financement de l'adaptation, les pertes et dommages ou encore le transfert de technologies doivent enfin devenir réalité. Face à l'urgence climatique, la complexité de la tâche qui nous attend consiste à renforcer la gouvernance climatique. À cet effet, il est nécessaire d'harmoniser et de simplifier les procédures d'accès, notamment de faciliter l'accès aux fonds destinés à l'action climatique. Notre pays demeure pleinement disposé à renforcer la coopération avec tous les partenaires internationaux dans un esprit de partenariat équitable et respectueux des principes qui guident l'action gouvernementale, à savoir le respect de la souveraineté du Mali, le respect des choix stratégiques et de partenaires opérés par le Mali et la prise en compte des intérêts vitaux des populations. La République du Mali, pour sa part, demeure convaincue que la COP30 aboutira à des résultats prometteurs pour faire face à l'urgence climatique, qu'elle contribuera au renforcement d'une coopération internationale plus solidaire, une justice climatique et une victoire collective dans notre lutte commune contre les changements climatiques. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Excellency.
is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Roger Barrow, Minister of Environment, Water and Sanitation of Burkina Faso. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, distingués délégués, je porte à cette auguste assemblée les salutations fraternelles de son Excellence, le capitaine Ibrahim Traoré, président du Faso, chef de l'État, artisan d'une nouvelle espérance pour le peuple burkinabé. Le Burkina Faso remercie le peuple frère de la République fédérative du Brésil pour l'accueil chaleureux et exprime sa satisfaction pour l'organisation de cette conférence qui se tient au cœur de la forêt amazonienne, sanctuaire de vie, de mémoire et de résilience. Il apporte tout son soutien à la présidence brésilienne pour faire de la COP30 un moment historique de relance de l'action climatique. Monsieur le Président, cette 30e COP nous offre une opportunité, celle d'unir nos voix et nos volontés afin de renforcer l'ambition climatique mondiale et traduire nos engagements en des actions concrètes capables de protéger des vies et d'offrir des moyens d'existence. C'est une responsabilité partagée mais différenciée. Je suis ici pour porter la voix d'un pays sahélien souverain dans ses choix et solidaire dans ses engagements. La voix d'un peuple digne et résilient qui, face à l'adversité, choisit toujours d'agir. La voix d'un pays pour lequel chaque arbre, chaque goutte d'eau, chaque parcelle de terre est une richesse à protéger, un héritage à transmettre et une promesse à tenir devant les générations futures. Ainsi, mon pays honore pleinement ses engagements pris dans le cadre de l'accord de Paris à travers sa CDN 3.0, plus ambitieuse qui vise une réduction de 30,87% des émissions d'ici 2030, avec un coût global de 7,5 milliards US, donc 2,8 milliards à rechercher. J'appelle à cette tribune une forte mobilisation des ressources pour la mise en œuvre du volet conditionnel des CDN. Aussi, le plan national d'adaptation 2024-2028, les stratégies RED+, la stratégie de sécurité climatique et les mécanismes endogènes de financement traduisent la responsabilité et l'engagement de mon pays en faveur du climat. Monsieur le Président, distingués délégués, sous l'impulsion du chef de l'État, le Burkina Faso mène une révolution populaire progressiste avec une coloration verte dans l'optique de contribuer à renforcer ses puits carbone, réduire ses émissions de gaz à effet de serre et renforcer la résilience des populations. J'en veux pour preuve l'ère patriotique pour reverdir le Faso, plus de 5 millions d'arbres plantés en 1 heure, la mise en place de 80 bosquets à plantes médicinales, l'opérationnalisation des systèmes d'alerte, la vulgarisation de l'énergie solaire et des initiatives de gestion intégrée des ressources en eau. Un système national MRV pour garantir la transparence et la redevabilité. Ce ne sont pas des intentions, mais des actes. Le Burkina Faso est un pays sahélien qui s'élève avec un peuple qui crée, qui s'adapte vis-à-vis du climat. Mais il faut le dire avec clarté et insistance, l'Afrique n'a pas à mendier son droit à l'adaptation. La justice climatique exige des financements multipliés, accessibles et majoritairement des subventions. Maintenir le cap de 1,5 degré Celsius n'est pas une ambition, c'est un devoir moral envers l'humanité. Ceux qui ont le plus émis les gaz à effet de serre doivent assumer la plus grande part en triplant leurs efforts financiers pour l'adaptation. Ce devoir de responsabilité et de justice ne devrait en aucun cas être considéré comme une aide aux pays les moins industrialisés. En tout état de cause, le Burkina Faso refuse que ce devoir de justice climatique devienne un nouvel instrument de domination politique et assumera pleinement sa politique d'industrialisation. Monsieur le Président, la planète ne sera pas sauvée par l'orgueil technologique, ni par des promesses sans suite, mais par la volonté des peuples à être justes et redevables vis-à-vis de la planète Terre. Un proverbe mandingue rappelle que seul on va plus vite, ensemble on va plus loin. C'est dans cet esprit que le Burkina Faso, dans le cadre de la Confédération des États du Sahel, AES, marche aux côtés des groupes des pays les moins avancés, du groupe Afrique et du G77 plus la Chine, pour un nouvel ordre climatique fondé sur la souveraineté, l'équité, le respect et la justice. À cette COP, les besoins spéciaux et les circonstances particulières de l'Afrique doivent être pris en compte dans les décisions. Monsieur le Président, distingués délégués, fidèle à l'esprit du capitaine Thomas Sankara qui rappelait que l'audace est au commencement de toute victoire, soyons audacieux. Le temps des Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Sophalet Hieng, Minister of Environment of Cambodia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellency, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Cambodian delegation appreciates the Federative Republic of Brazil and the UNFCCC Secretariat for hosting the 30th UN Climate Change Conference here in the beautiful city of Belem. The political stability fostered by Samdech Akek Mahasenapadei Techo Hun Sen, President of the Senate, has laid the groundwork for our sustainable development goals. Under the leadership of Samdech Mahabowathapadei Hun Manet, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Cambodia, Cambodia reaffirmed its commitment to the Paris Agreement by submitting its NDC 3.0 on August 8, 2025. This plan increases the country's climate ambition, outlining a clear strategy to reduce greenhouse gas by up to 55% by 2035, compared to a business-as-usual scenario. Cambodia's NDC 3.0 set a clear pathway for low-carbon and climate-resilient development across key sectors, including energy, industry, agriculture, forestry, and waste. On forests and ecosystems, Cambodia is scaling up nature-based solutions through restoring degraded landscapes and supporting biodiversity conservation and local livelihoods. Cambodia welcomes the Tropical Forest Forever facility to provide resort-based financial support to tropical forest countries. As one of the most climate-vulnerable countries, Cambodia welcomes the operationalization of the fund for responding to loss and damage, and called for a swift capitalization with needs-based and grant-based financing. On climate finance, Cambodia and other developing countries are calling for scaled-up, predictable, affordable, and accessible climate finance that truly reflects the scale of our shared challenge. Direct access to funds, simplified procedures, and mobilization of private and innovative finance will be key to unlocking climate ambition at all levels. Cambodia remains deeply committed to working with all partners to advance mutual benefits for people, economies, and ecosystems alike. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Aziz Abdul Hakimov, Minister of Ecology, Environmental Protection and Climate Change of Uzbekistan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Honorable Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a true honor to address this distinguished gathering at COP30 here in the heart of the Amazon, where we meet at a truly critical moment. The climate crisis is already reshaping nature and society with the rising temperatures, water scarcity, and environmental change affecting biodiversity, health, and economies. Dear colleagues, today, more than 20% of Central Asian region's land is degraded. It continues at a rate of 9 square meters per minute. Dear colleagues, can you imagine in just the 7 days of this COP about 90,000 square meters of land have degraded, equal to food and income loss of 300 families' village. It is estimated that by mid-century, crop yields could be declined by 1/3. According to recent research, the temperature in Central Asian region already increased by 2.2 degrees Celsius, and this affects water resources available. Even achieving a commitment of 1.5 degrees, but in Central Asia region, it means would rises by double and exceed 3 degrees of warming. Glaciers in Central Asia shrink by 0.5% every year, already losing about 30% of their volume. The amount of water available per person in Uzbekistan has almost halved. Dear participants, in our new NDC 3.0, we target to reduce the GHG emission per unit of GDP by 50% by 2035, compared to 2010 levels, or 15% increased from our previous target. Under the leadership of His Excellency President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, Uzbekistan has placed climate action at the heart of its national development agenda. Guided by strategic vision, we are pushing ambitious and concrete goals, expanding renewable energy generation to 25,000 megawatts and increasing the share of renewable up to 54% within the next 5 years, reducing annual emissions by over 16 million tons of CO2, expanding forests to 6.1 million hectares, including 2.3 million hectares in the RLC region, with the Yashil Makon program aimed to increase the greenery spaces from 4% in 2016 up to 30% by 2030, achieving 95% coverage of solid waste collection, with 35% of waste used for energy generation. There are not just targets on paper, there are concrete actions on our path towards the greener, sustainable and climate resilient Uzbekistan. Honorable delegates, Central Asia, one of the regions most affected by climate change, is taking coordinated action to strengthen mitigation and adaptation with the governments, civil societies, businesses and scientists. That's why under our ministry we have established the Green University initiative, bringing together partners from Central Asia, Azerbaijan and Mongolia. Dear delegates, using this opportunity, I would like to invite all of you to participate at the 8th Global Environment Facility Assembly in Samarkand, May 31st to June 5th, 2026, and parallel event Eco Expo Central Asia. I thank you for your attention. Katar Ahmad.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Tawfiq Abdul Wahid Al-Sharjbi, Minister of Water and Environment of Yemen. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
السيد الرئيس، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، تتقدم الجمهورية اليمنية بخالص الشكر للبرازيل على استضافة هذا المؤتمر وعلى قيادة العمل المناخي العالمي نحو مسار أكثر عدالة وطموح. يعكس اجتماعنا اليوم إدراكا جماعيا بأن مستقبلنا يتوقف على العمل السريع والمسؤولية المشتركة. تأتي اليمن إلى هذا المحفل وهي تواجه هشاشة مناخية غير مسبوقة. إن الأثر التراكمي للجفاف والفيضانات والعواصف المدارية يعمل كمضاعف رئيسي لعدم الاستقرار في بلادنا، وتعد أزمتنا الأكثر حرجا هي ندرة المياه، حيث يصل العجز الوطني الحاد إلى أكثر من 2.6 مليار متر مكعب سنويا. تضرب هذه الفجوة المائية صميم أمننا الغذائي، مما يؤثر بشدة على الإنتاج الزراعي وسبل العيش في عموم البلد. وعلى الرغم من الظروف الصعبة، فإن رؤيتنا الوطنية من الهشاشة إلى المرونة والشمولية تعكس توجهنا لتحديث المساهمات المحددة وطنيا، بحيث يصبح العمل المناخي بارزا في جميع المسارات نحو التنمية المستدامة ومكافحة الفقر، مع إعطاء الأولوية لجهود التكيف لحماية الأرواح والمجتمعات المحلية وتحقيق التحول إلى التنمية ومنخفضة الانبعاثات. نحن ننفذ هذه الرؤية بنشاط ونعمل على وضع الصيغة النهائية لمساهمتنا المحددة وطنيا وإعداد تقرير الشفافية الدوري، وكذلك خطتنا الوطنية للتكيف. معالي الرئيس، إن طموحاتنا المناخية لا يمكن تتحقق من غير التمويل المناخي، كما أن نص وروح المادة 9.1 هما أساس الثقة العالمية، ومع ذلك لا يزال الوصول إلى هذا التمويل صعبا بسبب حواجز هيكلية معقدة. نطالب بمعاملة عادلة وإجراءات أبسط وأدوات تعكس واقع الدول النامية. تؤكد اليمن دعمها لمطالب الدول الأقل نمو والموقف المشترك للمجموعة العربية بشأن الانتقال العادل، والأهم من ذلك تستحق الدول التي تعاني من الظروف الصعبة مثل الدول المتأثرة بالصراعات مثل اليمن معاملة خاصة في ترتيبات التمويل لمنع تحول فجوات التمويل إلى أسباب جديدة لعدم الاستقرار. السيد الرئيس، يعتمد انتقالنا على الوصول العادل والسهل إلى التكنولوجيا النظيفة من تحلية المياه منخفضة التكلفة والزراعة الذكية مناخيا إلى نظم الرصد الفعالة، كما أن الاستثمار في بناء القدرات المؤسسية والبشرية أمر بالغ الأهمية لتنفيذ المشاريع بكفاءة. في الختام، تحمل اليمن إرادة واضحة وصادقة لتكون جزءا فاعلا من الحل. نحن نؤكد أن العمل المناخي هو الطريق الأكثر استقرار نحو تحقيق السلام والاستقرار المستدام. وأشكركم.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Wente B. Molotsi, Minister of Environment and Tourism of Botswana. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, COP30 President, Honorable Ministers present here, Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Botswana extends its heartfelt gratitude to the government and people of Brazil for their warm hospitality. Belem, gateway to the Amazon, reminds us that protecting nature is not an abstraction, it is a duty to current and future generations. We fully support the Brazilian presidency's vision to make this the implementation COP to reinforce multilateralism, connect the climate regime to people's real lives, and accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Excellencies, as a nation facing severe climate vulnerabilities and impacts, Botswana recognizes the existential threat climate change poses to our sustainable development. It is on this basis that we fully align with the objectives and the principles of both the Convention and the Paris Agreement. We are therefore here to ensure that Paris delivers, and we must keep the 1.5-degree goal within reach. Botswana's unique ecological features constitute our precious natural resource base, which is increasingly vulnerable to climate variability and change. Our nation faces the prime challenge of achieving sustainable management of renewable natural resources in a semi-arid environment amidst a growing human population. Our approach is guided by the sobering reality that Botswana may experience temperature increases of 1 to 3 degrees Celsius by 2050. Consistent with best available science from the IPCC, with most models predicting rainfall declines of 10 to 25%. Summer temperatures of above 40 degrees Celsius in Botswana are now a reality. These changes directly threaten livelihoods, water security, agriculture, and energy, making climate action an urgent priority for our national development. Given Botswana's high vulnerability to climate impacts, adaptation remains our paramount priority. We continue to allocate substantial portion of our GDP to adapting to climate change, which should not be the case. We therefore call for a decision here in Belem that operationalizes the global goal on adaptation, linking targets, indicators, and the need for predictable grant-based finance to implement the GGA and its targets. A decision for the implementation of national adaptation plans is an urgent priority for Africa. Tripling adaptation finance is not an aspiration, it is a necessity. On indicators, we want to stress the importance of agreeing on indicators that are outcome-based, fit for purpose, align with the provisions of the Convention and the Paris Agreement, and do not shift obligations of the climate crisis to developing countries. Excellencies, Botswana has embraced a transformative approach to climate policy integration. The National Development Plan 12, 2025-2030. As the second implementation plan for our Vision 2036, NDP 12 represents Botswana's first comprehensive effort to align development priorities with the national transformation strategy and climate resilience. This 5-year plan, adopted by our Parliament, mainstreams climate action across all sectors of our economy. Green transition priorities, Within NDP 12, green transition has been identified as a key development priority, accelerating our journey towards a climate-resilient economy. Whole of government approach. The government of Botswana is advancing the development of this national long-term low emissions development strategy in line with Article 4.19 of the Paris Agreement. This is not merely a compliance exercise. This strategy is designed to be the cornerstone that guides our nation's long-term climate and development trajectory. It is the critical instrument that will synchronize our national ambitions with global climate goals. Despite our minimal contribution to global emissions, Botswana has demonstrated its commitment to the Paris Agreement through submission of its nationally determined contributions and is currently revising it. Our NDC is at 15% reduction target by 2030. The attainment of this target, however, is contingent upon the provision of means of implementation from developed countries. We are hoping to achieve this target through renewable energy expansion 2030, through the implementation of solar photovoltaic concentrated solar plants, and wind energy projects and economic diversification, among others. On just transition, we need to address the scale and nature of the means of implementation, references to transitioning away from fossil fuels, the establishment of a just transition mechanism, and the scope of human rights language. Furthermore, while we transition, we call on developed countries not to impose unilateral trade measures that harm our fragile economies and welcome trade measures that enable fair access to transition's opportunities. Transition minerals essential for the Paris goals must be managed to support just transition pathways that address local impacts and enable value chain upgrading in Africa. On issues related to climate finance, delivery of pledges by the developed world, as well as setting a framework for a new deal on finance, it is of critical importance to know that finance is an important enabler of climate action. It is therefore imperative that climate finance be made available and accessible to developing countries to enable them to meet their set targets in their nationally determined contributions by 2030. We need to agree on the need to scale up climate finance to meet the growing needs of developing countries in line with the Belem roadmap target of mobilizing at least 1.3 trillion annually by 2035. It is our wish that the operationalization of the funding arrangement of the loss and damage financial mechanism is concluded during this COP, as this will be a huge milestone towards improving the livelihoods of our affected populations. Therefore, Botswana urges the parties to conclude on the agenda speedily. Let me conclude by pledging my support to the work ahead of us all. I wish to urge the COP presidency to direct the debates in a manner that could deliver timely results in implementation, including on means of implementation, particularly climate finance for adaptation and mitigation actions, technology development, and conclusion on the loss and damage. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Armando Rodriguez Batista, Minister of Science, Technology and Environment of Cuba. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Señor Presidente, Excelencias, nuestro más sincero agradecimiento al Presidente Lula, al Gobierno y pueblo de Brasil. Un especial afecto al Estado de Pará y a la ciudad de Belém por hacer posible este encuentro en el corazón de la Amazonía, símbolo de vida y de respeto a los pueblos originarios. Señor Presidente, comparezco en nombre de Cuba, un pequeño Estado insular en desarrollo que enfrenta con crudeza las consecuencias de la crisis climática global. Para nosotros, el cambio climático es una realidad presente que erosiona nuestras costas, saliniza acuíferos, intensifica huracanes y provoca profundos impactos en la salud, la seguridad alimentaria y la economía. Hace apenas unos días, el poderoso huracán Melissa atravesó el Caribe, afectando gravemente a Cuba y otras tierras hermanas. Sus vientos y lluvias, alimentados por un océano anormalmente cálido, devastaron comunidades y arrasaron cultivos. Por otro lado, el nivel medio del mar en nuestras costas podría aumentar 0.95 metros para 2100, amenazando 136 asentamientos humanos y el 6% del territorio emergido. El informe bienal de transparencia presentado a la Convención y la actualización de la contribución nacionalmente determinada son fruto de la ciencia y de la voluntad política de nuestro Gobierno. Invertir en ciencia e innovación no es opcional, es la base para una acción climática efectiva y soberana. Señor presidente, el impacto del bloqueo estadounidense sobre Cuba constituye una barrera estructural para nuestra acción climática. Las medidas coercitivas unilaterales limitan el acceso a financiamiento internacional, encareciendo cada proyecto, cada inversión en resiliencia y desarrollo bajo en emisiones. Mientras se nos exige cumplir con las metas del Acuerdo de París, se nos niegan las herramientas para hacerlo. Esta es la mayor injusticia climática que enfrentamos. La COP30 ya ha alcanzado un resultado esencial: mostrar que el multilateralismo es viable y la única forma coherente de lidiar con el cambio climático. Estamos exigiendo justicia y el cumplimiento de los compromisos de los países desarrollados, sustentados en sus responsabilidades históricas y las obligaciones contraídas bajo la Convención y el Acuerdo de París. Cuba está haciendo su parte. Hace más de 3 décadas, en Río de Janeiro, a unos 3.000 kilómetros de esta hermosa ciudad de Belém, con el profundo simbolismo de un contexto geopolítico cambiante, Fidel Castro describió el futuro que hoy contemplamos y cito: cesen los egoísmos, cesen los hegemonismos, mañana será demasiado tarde para hacer lo que debimos haber hecho hace mucho tiempo. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mike Elton Mafosha, Minister of Green Economy and Environment of Zambia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. I wish to appreciate the COP30 presidents, Your Excellencies. I am deeply honored to speak on behalf of the people of Zambia at this very important conference. As we gather here in the final week of COP30, I wish to remind ourselves that for the least developed countries, including Zambia, climate change is no longer a threat, but our lived reality on a daily basis. We grapple with its multiple impacts every day. Currently, Zambia is recovering from the impacts of the 2023-2024 drought, the most severe drought we have experienced in over 40 years. The drought affected food, energy and water security and the livelihoods of millions of our people. We therefore wish to underscore the urgency of climate crisis as it threatens not only our economic development but also our very existence as a people. On our part, we will endeavor to proactively take significant actions to adapt and contribute to mitigation against climate change. In this regard, this year we submitted our 3rd nationally determined contribution, NDC 3.0, in which we have kept our high ambitions of reducing emissions by 25% under domestic efforts, while indicating commitment and willingness to raise this ambition to 47% if we are to receive substantial external support in our climate action. As a country, we have progressively demonstrated our commitment by adding more sectors in our NDCs, moving from 3 sectors in our first NDC in 2016 to 6 sectors in our second NDC in 2021, and now 10 sectors in our NDC 3.0. This steady progress is intended to bring Zambia's climate action to an economic-wide approach, and we are getting close to that goal. Additionally, this year we submitted our first biannual transparency report and the 4th national communication underscoring our commitment to advancing the goals of the Paris Agreement through the enhanced transparency framework. Your Excellencies, as negotiations intensify in this final week of COP30, I wish to stress that COP30 as an implementation COP should be about action and ensure that agreements are implemented and not just negotiated. COP30 should be an essential platform to forge common solutions to to the challenge of climate change. Let me end by reminding ourselves that the planet Earth is our only home, and together we must act now, as our actions today will define the future of our planet. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Diana Anda Luzaianu, Minister of Environment, Waters and Forests of Romania. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
I sat on the roof of the house all night, looking at the neighbors, thinking whether or not the water will swallow us all. These are the words of Raluca, a victim of this year's floods in northern Romania, who managed to survive by climbing on the roof of her mother's house. During 1900s and 2024, in Romania, there were more than 100 catastrophic climate events that affected the lives of more than 2 million people, and the losses were up to $20 billion. Your Excellencies, it is an honor to address this Congress on behalf of Romania. For us Romanians, climate change, adaptation to climate change, they are not abstract concepts. This year alone, more than 100 localities in Romania faced water restriction due to extreme droughts. More than 30% of the territory of Romania is subject to desertification, making the lives of millions of people harder each year. One of the oldest forests in the European Union, found in my country, Romania, are starting to dry out, and scientists warn us that in the next 50 years, hundreds of thousands of hectares of forests will be lost because they will not survive to the new climate. So the message is clear. We must step up. These are not the realities that should be our future. There should not be a question whether or not we act in order to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 Celsius degrees. The only question that we should ask ourselves is how will we deliver the results that the next generations depend upon. We are proud members of the European Union, and we stand together with the commitment to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions from 66 to 72% by 2035. We are determined to do our fair share, and this is because we understand that climate change, at its core, it's a human rights issue. National efforts will not be enough. European efforts will not be enough. We need a global commitment. And yet we understand that the path forward is not easy. A just transition must take into account national context. We are not in a competition where some countries move ahead while others stay behind. We are together in a mission in which each state must support one another in order to achieve the greater good. We are not competitors, but brothers in the shared global responsibility. Dear colleagues, we are here at Belém in a mission of restoring trust. We need to show that promises lead to action, and that action actually deliver the results that the lives of the people in the next generation depend upon and the planet needs. After the floods in this year, Raluca told me one thing: you must not leave us alone in the face of these horrors. People are demanding action, and we must deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Sari Multala, Minister of Environment of Finland. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, let me first thank our Brazilian hosts for all the hospitality and your leadership. Climate change and other global environmental crises cannot be solved without all of us working together. In 10 years since the Paris Agreement was adopted, we have made a lot of progress. But the science is clear. Much more is needed for keeping the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. What the world expects from us in Belém is a clear message that we stand firm behind the goals of the Paris Agreement. We cannot let the 1.5 degrees goal slip away for good. Every fragment of a degree matters. Every action and every actor matters. The only way that we can keep the 1.5 degree goal alive is to rapidly move ahead with the transition away from fossil fuels. This is something we jointly agreed to do 2 years ago in Dubai. Major emitters need to lead the way. Affordable alternatives exist, and they have many co-benefits too. My country, Finland, is strongly committed to urgent and science-based climate action. In addition to our joint NDC with the EU and all its member states, Finland has set one of the world's most ambitious national targets to reach carbon neutrality by 2035 and carbon negativity soon thereafter. Our path towards a carbon neutral economy is based on 3 pillars: rapid emission reductions, strengthening carbon sinks, and investing in innovation. Clean energy transition is actually Finland's success story. The Finnish power sector is almost carbon-free, as the renewables and nuclear power constitute almost already 95% of the total electricity production. Clean energy solutions have also helped us to break away from Russian fossil energy imports, create sustainable growth and well-being, and improve our comprehensive security. We cannot succeed without significant investments to research, innovation and clean technology. Finnish companies have expertise in smart and clean solutions, including the fields of energy, mobility, logistics, mining and built environment. Many of these solutions are presented here in Belem in our pavilion. We believe that climate action and growth go hand in hand. Investment for climate is also the growth and prosperity plan for this century. Excellencies, Paris Agreement gave us the global goal on adaptation. Here in Belem, we want to agree on a set of adaptation indicators. These indicators will help us in preparing adaptation plans and in tracking progress in adaptation action and resilience in our countries. I look forward to having these indicators agreed at COP30. Excellencies, in these times of uncertainty and accelerating change, we must work together, build trust between the nations and communities, and commit to a shared responsibility for the planet and the people. COP30 must send a clear message that the green transition is here to stay and that fossil fuels have no future. 10 years after Paris, let us make sure Belem will be remembered as a success too. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Jiwo Emmanuel Abdullahi, Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Sierra Leone. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. COP30 Presidency, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I bring you greetings from the people and government of Sierra Leone. Allow me to congratulate the government of Brazil and the COP30 Presidency for hosting this important conference in the beautiful city of Belém at the heart of the Amazon, one of the most vital ecosystems on our planet. Excellencies, I'd like to recognize the landmark agreement made 10 years ago in Paris that renewed trust in multilateralism. Over the past 10 years, a lot of progress has been made, but we need to do more. Sierra Leone stands before you today from the front line of a climate crisis that is hitting our people with increasing severity. Floods wipe out homes and livelihoods. Landslides claim lives. Rising seas continue to swallow islands and settlements and erode our coasts. Unpredictable rainfall endangers food security, and extreme heat threatens the health and economic stability of millions. This is the daily reality of a country that has contributed almost nothing to this global crisis. It is a reality that is unjust and morally indefensible. Despite these hardships, Sierra Leone continues to push forward with ambition and resolve. Under the leadership of President Julius Maada Bio, our third-generation NDC articulates our ambition to reduce emissions, strengthen adaptation, and protect our people from the worst impacts of climate change. We are restoring forests and critical watersheds, mangrove forests that protect our coasts. We're expanding climate-smart agriculture, promoting renewable energy to power rural homes, health centers, and schools, and strengthening community early warning systems. Sierra Leone refuses to surrender to the climate crisis. We choose resilience, transformation, and progress. Excellencies, while vulnerable countries continue to suffer from the effects of climate change, the negotiations under this process are moving far too slowly. The world does not have the luxury of time, and neither do the people of Sierra Leone. Adaptation must move from vague aspirations to concrete action. It requires strong targets backed by finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. Without this, the GGA risks becoming an empty declaration rather than a lifeline for vulnerable nations. Africa and LDCs cannot build climate-resilient economies without access to appropriate technologies, which must be available and affordable. Excellencies, adaptation finance must be publicly funded, match the scale of the problem, and be focused on the priorities of the most vulnerable developing countries. Sierra Leone cannot wait for years for these promises to turn into action. Our people need support now. Excellencies, here in Belem, surrounded by a powerful symbol of Amazon rainforest, the world is watching. COP30 must deliver meaningful outcomes. Sierra Leone expects a clear, ambitious goal on adaptation, a serious and transformative finance goal, and rapid progress on technology transfer. This is a decisive moment. The window for preserving a safe future is closing with alarming speed. What happens here will be remembered for generations. History will not forgive hesitation, and it will not forgive empty commitments. It will judge us by the courage we show and the actions we take. Sierra Leone stands ready to act, but we cannot face this crisis alone. We urge all parties to rise to this moment with honesty, ambition, and solidarity. Let us leave Belem with decisions that deliver hope for our people and protection for our climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Habib Abed, Minister of Environment of Tunisia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فخامة الرئيس لولا دا سيلفا رئيس جمهورية البرازيل، حضرة السيد الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، أصحاب المعالي، حضرات السيدات والسادة، أتقدم في مستهل كلمتي بخالص عبارة الشكر والتقدير إلى جمهورية البرازيل على كرم الضيافة وحسن تنظيم، وعلى ما بذلته من جهود لتوفير أفضل الظروف لإنجاح أعمال هذه الدورة 30 لمؤتمر الأطراف التي تنعقد في ظرف دقيق تتزايد فيه الحاجة إلى تعزيز الثقة والعمل الجماعي لمواجهة التحديات المناخية المتسارعة. حضرات السيدات والسادة، رغم مرور أكثر من 3 عقود على إقرار الاتفاقية الإطارية للأمم المتحدة بشأن التغير المناخي، ورغم ما تحقق من تقدم بفضل اتفاق باريس، فإن الواقع يؤكد أن الجهود الحالية ما تزال دون مستوى التحدي. تسارع وتيرة الظواهر المناخية القصوى واتساع آثارها على النظم البيئية والاقتصادية باتا يشكلان تهديدا مباشرا للاستقرار العالمي ولحقوق الشعوب في التنمية والأمن الغذائي والصحة والعيش الكريم. تونس التي لا تتجاوز انبعاثات الغازات الدافئة بنسبة 0.07% من إجمالي العالمي تعاني اليوم من آثار تغير المناخ على مواردها الطبيعية وخاصة المياه والزراعة، وعلى اقتصادها الوطني الذي يواجه ضغوطا متزايدة في ظل الجفاف وتراجع الإنتاجية الزراعية وتزايد كلفة التكيف. ورغم هذه التحديات تبقى تونس ثابتة في التزامها بالعمل المناخي، إيمانا منها بأن مواجهة هذه الأزمة مسؤولية جماعية، وبأن العدالة المناخية ركيزة أساسية لتحقيق التنمية. حضرات السيدات والسادة، في هذا الإطار قامت تونس بتحديث مساهمتها المحددة وطنيا الثالثة بشكل يعكس مستوى طموح أعلى في الحد من الانبعاثات. حضرات السيدات والسادة، في هذا السياق تؤكد تونس على أهمية تفعيل صندوق الخسائر والأضرار، ضرورة تحديد الهدف العالمي جديد، ووجوب تعزيز الشراكات الدولية. لقد أثبتت التجربة أن مواجهة التغيرات المناخية ليست مسألة بيئية فحسب، بل هي قضية تنموية واقتصادية وإنسانية في جوهرها. ومن هذا المنطلق تؤكد تونس على أن نجاح العمل المناخي لا يمكن فصله عن احترام القيم الإنسانية الأساسية، وفي مقدمتها الحق في الحياة والكرامة والأمن. ومن هذا المنطلق تعبر تونس عن قلقها العميق إزاء المأساة الإنسانية التي يعيشها أشقاؤنا في فلسطين، حيث يتواصل العدوان على الشعب الفلسطيني الأعزل في ظل الأوضاع إنسانية كارثية جراء الانتهاكات الجسيمة للقانون الدولي الإنساني واستهداف المدنيين وخاصة الأطفال والنساء والكبار. أن سياسة التجويع والممنهجة ومنع المساعدات الإنسانية وحرمان السكان من الماء والغذاء والدواء أدت إلى أزمة صحية وإنسانية غير مسبوقة وارتفاع مأساوي في أعداد الضحايا. ومن هذا الإطار وجب اليوم على المؤتمر الأممي حماية الإنسان والتدخل الفوري لرفع الحصار وتمكين الشعب الفلسطيني من المساعدات الإنسانية. في الختام أجدد شكري لجمهورية البرازيل على حسن الضيافة، وأؤكد التزام تونس الثابت بمواصلة العمل الجاد والمسؤول لتنفيذ اتفاق باريس. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Rohi John, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources of the Gambia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, on behalf of the President of the Republic of the Gambia, His Excellency President Adama Barrow, I am pleased and honored to extend sincere gratitude and greetings to His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, President of Brazil, the government and people of Brazil, for hosting COP30 in this beautiful port city of Belém. Let us be reminded that the Gambia, though among the nations least responsible for global greenhouse gas emission, remains one of the most vulnerable to the devastating impacts of climate change. Our economy remains heavily dependent on climate-sensitive sectors such as agriculture and fisheries, and our coastal zone is under increasing threat from sea level rise and storm surge. Mr. President, despite our limited resources, we have made tremendous progress. The Gambia's second NDC sets a target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 49.7% below business as usual by 2030, while working towards a vision of net zero emission by 2050, costed at $4 billion US. We have also integrated climate consideration into our current national development plans, strengthened partnerships, and initiated the operationalization of nature-based solutions and broadened resilience-building efforts. In addition, we have recently developed our climate prosperity investment and financial strategy, which outlines a clear pathway for mobilizing resources and driving transformative climate resilient growth. The Gambia underscores the urgency to move beyond theoretical ambitions to practical implementation of NDCs and is working to have a national climate change bill as an act now that will provide stronger legal framework on our climate action. Our climate ambitions depends on enabling conditions and means of implementation, including accessible finance, technology and capacity support to strengthen our national and local institutions for enhancing community resilience. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, adaptation is no longer optional. It is an urgent necessity for safeguarding lives, livelihoods, and ecosystems, especially in the world's most climate vulnerable countries. As we conclude UAE Belem work program, the Gambia underscores that delivering the global goal on adaptation requires moving beyond planning to scaling of finance that is predictable and grant-based that enables real implementation on the ground. We urge all parties to constructively decide on adaptation indicators delivered by experts and optionalize their implementation for tracking progress in achieving global goal climate resilience. Let us be clear, without accessible, reliable, and predictable climate finance, building resilience will remain to be mere aspirations. Therefore, the Gambia calls for an inclusion to have a significant increase in adaptation finance, particularly to LDCs and seeds, consistent with Article 9.4 of the Paris Agreement. A substantial and timely contribution to the fund for responding to loss and damage that corresponds to the scale of loss and damage suffered. Only through these actions can adaptation become a pillar of global climate actions and ambition delivered meaningfully resilience outcome for the most vulnerable, which the Gambia also includes. Mr. President, the Gambia considers the recent International Court of Justice advisory opinions aforementioned that restitution, including ecosystem restoration, is a legal obligation, reinforcing the justice dimension of loss and damage. On just transition, equity, and special circumstances of the LDCs and seeds must be at the heart of climate action. We support the elevation of the Just Transition Work Program as a central pillar of the UNFCCC process. Mr. President, Excellencies, allow me to conclude by stressing that we cannot fail our future. We cannot fail our only planet. We cannot fail our women. We cannot fail our children and our youth, who are the most affected and the least contributors to climate crisis. The Gambia stands ready to work constructively with all parties to deliver an outcome from Belem that is balanced and implementable, noting that finance must be at the heart of the decision pillar. Let me remind you, we must leave Belem with renewed resolve that we are united to strengthen hope and partnership with a clear path towards climate action and resilience for all. We cannot fail our generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Irene Valdez Torres, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excelencias, distinguidas delegaciones. El mundo enfrenta una crisis climática y ambiental que arriesga a volverse catástrofe. Y no admite de nosotros, gobernantes del mundo, más demoras. La ciencia nos recuerda que el tiempo para mantener vivo el objetivo del 1,5 grados se está agotando. Necesitamos un mandato claro de una hoja de ruta que ordene la eliminación de los combustibles fósiles. Este camino debe ser multilateral, justo y coherente con las realidades y necesidades de cada país. Sabemos que hay contextos diferenciados y responsabilidades diferenciadas. Por ejemplo, entre productores y consumidores, las islas o los países del sur que tenemos una enorme presión y limitación originadas en las enormes deudas externas nacionales. No queremos un compromiso que se limite a sustituciones parciales de energía o a soluciones incompletas ni falsas. Nuestra convicción es que debemos lograr el cero absoluto de emisiones. sustituir las fuentes fósiles de energía y acompañar estos esfuerzos con una transición económica y fiscal urgente en países productores como Colombia. La reestructuración del sistema financiero es urgente y debe priorizar la justicia climática. Estamos convencidas de que la sinergia entre acción climática y protección de la diversidad debe estar en la agenda de la COP30. No habrá equilibrio climático sin la conservación de los bosques existentes o la rehabilitación de las selvas que hemos perdido o deforestado. Proponemos que esta COP adopte una decisión robusta que establezca un espacio sustantivo para discutir la integración entre la conservación de la naturaleza y las acciones climáticas. Finalmente, ninguna acción climática será efectiva sin la participación plena de los pueblos originarios indígenas, campesinos y afrodescendientes. Son ellas las comunidades guardianas históricas de los territorios y la naturaleza. Son nuestras aliadas por la justicia climática y ambiental. Por eso debemos reconocer su conocimiento tradicional como parte de las acciones estratégicas de justicia climática, garantizar su participación plena en la definición de las metas de acción climática, así como un acceso justo y directo al financiamiento climático. Excelencias, avanzar en un mapa du camino, una hoja de ruta o un roadmap para la eliminación de los combustibles fósiles, profundizar las sinergias entre clima y biodiversidad y garantizar la participación en el financiamiento de los pueblos son tres pilares concretos que queremos que esta COP pueda materializar y de esta manera dar una señal inequívoca de coherencia y de responsabilidad para evitar la catástrofe climática que nos amenaza. Es momento de no darle la espalda a las comunidades y a la ciudadanía movilizada también en las calles de Belén. Es momento de aliarnos con los pueblos y sus voces por la justicia climática ya. Como gobiernos debemos estar a la altura de este momento histórico y les invitamos a todos a seguir avanzando por esta justicia climática y ambiental que la historia hoy nos reclama. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Hassan Bakhit Jamous, Minister of Environment, Fisheries and Sustainable Development of Chad. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la COP30, Monsieur le Secrétaire exécutif de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur le changement climatique, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est avec un profond sentiment d'honneur et de responsabilité que je prends la parole au nom du maréchal du Tchad, Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, président de la République, chef de l'État du Tchad, pour livrer ce message de vision, d'engagement du Tchad face aux défis climatiques qui menacent notre humanité commune. Avant toute chose, qu'il me soit permis d'exprimer notre gratitude au peuple frère du Brésil pour son accueil empreint de chaleur et pour la remarquable organisation de cette conférence des parties. Nos remerciements vont également à son Excellence, le Président Luis Lula da Silva, dont le charisme visionnaire et la conviction humaniste incarnent l'esprit de solidarité et de leadership qui inspire cette COP30 à Belém, au cœur de la forêt amazonienne. Sanctuaire de vie et symbole de notre responsabilité commune. Le Tchad, pays sahélien situé au cœur de l'Afrique, se tient aujourd'hui à la croisée des vulnérabilités climatiques et des espoirs de transformation durable. Le vent brûlant de la désertification, les sécheresses prolongées, les inondations dévastatrices et la rareté croissante de l'eau bouleversent nos territoires, compromettant ainsi les moyens de subsistance de nos populations et les perspectives de développement de toute une nation. Les données scientifiques sont alarmantes. Un score global largement supérieur à la moyenne sur la vulnérabilité financière et un risque climatique au-dessus de la norme. Ces constats documentés et chiffrés à l'appui placent le Tchad parmi les pays les plus exposés au monde, rappelant l'urgence d'une réponse globale et concertée. Malheureusement, derrière ces statistiques, il y a des vies, des familles, des terres ancestrales. Il y a aussi un peuple qui, malgré l'adversité, continue de croire en la force de la résilience et en la dignité du travail. Mais au-delà de cette vulnérabilité, le Tchad n'est pas seulement un témoin de la crise climatique. Il est aussi un acteur potentiel et essentiel de l'équilibre écologique mondial. Notre territoire abrite des sites d'une valeur scientifique exceptionnelle, dont certains participent silencieusement mais puissamment au grand cycle naturel de la planète. Parmi eux, la dépression de Belem, vaste cuvette désertique au nord du pays, se distingue comme l'une des principales sources de poussière minérale du globe. Portées par le vent saharien, ces fines particules traversent parfois l'Atlantique et atteignent, selon plusieurs études de la NASA, le bassin amazonien où elles apporteraient une part notable de nutriments minéraux essentiels à la régénération des sols. Ces phénomènes à la fois poétiques et scientifiques illustrent l'interdépendance profonde entre les continents. Le souffle du Sahara nourrit les racines de l'Amazonie. Il nous rappelle que le destin du Tchad et du Brésil, du Sahel et de l'Amazonie se rejoignent dans une même respiration planétaire. Ainsi, Belem n'est pas qu'un symbole saharien. Il est un pont de sable, de vie entre deux mondes. Un message de la nature nous exportant à penser la Terre comme un tout indivisible. Les actions perturbatrices du climat, fruit des décennies de surconsommation, d'exploitation désordonnée et d'inaction politique, bouleversent l'équilibre planétaire. Les glaciers fondent, les forêts s'embrassent, les mers montent, les espèces disparaissent et les hommes fuient leurs terres. Le dérèglement climatique n'est plus une hypothèse, il est la crise morale, économique et sociale de notre temps. Il exige de nous un sursaut de conscience et des rarement moral et une action politique résolue. Le Tchad appelle à honorer les promesses de l'accord de Paris et de concrétiser les engagements financiers. Nous soutenons la position commune africaine qui réclame un nouvel objectif collectif de financement climatique d'au moins 1 300 milliards de dollars par an d'ici 2035, fondé sur les ressources publiques, concessionnelles et directement accessibles aux pays vulnérables. Il est temps de bâtir un système financier mondial plus juste, plus transparent et plus réactif au service de la survie et du profit. Sur le plan national, le Tchad poursuit la mise à jour de sa contribution déterminée au niveau national, la CDN 3.0 et de son plan national d'adaptation, intégrant des objectifs ambitieux en matière d'énergie renouvelable, d'agriculture durable, de foresterie et de gestion des ressources naturelles. Notre plan national de développement, Tchad Connexion 2030, ambition de mobiliser 30 milliards de dollars américains sur 5 années à travers 268 projets structurants pour accroître le PIB de 60% et de sortir 2,5 millions de nos concitoyens de la pauvreté. Cette transformation audacieuse repose sur un principe simple: faire de la vulnérabilité climatique un moteur d'innovation et de résilience exemplaire. Le lac Tchad, autrefois mer intérieure prospère, se vide peu à peu de sa subsistance et de ses promesses. Son déclin alimente les tensions, les migrations et les conflits. Le lien entre climat, paix et sécurité n'est pas une abstraction académique. C'est une réalité quotidienne, tangible, qui exige une réponse intégrée et solidaire des nations. Aucun mur, aucune frontière et aucune armée ne saurait contenir les conséquences du désordre climatique. Face à la gravité du moment, il ne nous reste qu'une voie, celle de la solidarité et de l'action. Nous devons arriver ici à Belém et raviver la flamme de la volonté collective, non par intérêt, mais par devoir. Notre génération possède les moyens technologiques, les ressources financières et surtout la conscience morale pour inverser la tendance. Faisons de cette COP30 la conférence de la responsabilité et de la renaissance. Faisons du Tchad et du Sahel les symboles d'un nouvel humanisme climatique fondé sur l'équité, la dignité et la vie. Je vous remercie.
Distinguished delegates, this brings us to the end of our national statements for this morning. I thank the interpreters for their flexibility. We will now suspend the delivery of statements of the high-level segment and resume in this room at 1500 hours. I declare this joint meeting of the COP, CMP and CMA suspended. Thank you.